Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today, you and I are going to be talking about a lot of things related to music and harmony. Before we begin, I am not an expert on classical music or jazz or really just anything regarding to music theory in general. However, I've been able to kind of utilize a little bit of knowledge to kind of wiggle my way through along with, I would say, intuition or instinct of how a song should be made. The key thing that I want to discuss today is answer a few questions of A, do you need music theory in order to make stuff? And if yes, then how much? And B, can you still get something that is the same thing or on the similar path as if you were using, let's say, like chord tools or arpeggiators and all that stuff? So let's start with the first one. Um, I do believe that you can get really far with intuition if you have a decent ear, but I do think that you also need to study. You have to have a means of cultivation to where songs are in your head that you can kind of draw inspiration from or pull one up and know how to be inspired by that and not sit there and try to make the exact same chord and guess, you know, what the exact distribution of keys are whenever you're trying to do stuff. So I've got this piece for you that I made earlier today. It's nothing crazy, and please, I'm sure that jazz people are going to be like super cringed about it. But without having a lot of theory, and by not a lot of theory, I know scales, I know basic chord shapes or basic chord patterns, meaning that I know how to make, a seventh and a ninth and a 13th. And then I know how to modify those chords and change the modality without knowing exactly what it is. So yeah, let's take a listen to that. And then what we'll do is I'll pull up an arpeggiator or basically we'll pull up a sequencer and then we'll talk about how we're going to get different stuff and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, this is what I wrote this morning and, it's nothing special, but I really wanted to focus on, no, I'll talk about it in a minute. Yeah, so this just makes me smile because it was fun to make. Here's the thing. If you are a producer and you are trying to make jazz, you're most likely not going to get the realism, the humanism, um, and there's going to be a lot of notations and a lot of things that you're not going to be aware of that other people that do have a jazz or classical background will be able to pick up on. For example, one of the most common mistakes that people make, myself included, that I've done is when you have too many notes on a piano that a real person can't possibly play, or same thing with a drummer, right? These are just things that as you get better over time, you'll become, thank you for the follow, you'll become more aware of. But I don't think that you, if you're asking if you're going to make, something that is on par with a classically trained artist, then no. Does that mean that you can still make something really fantastic? That might be equally as good utilizing the tools and the backup stuff that you have as a producer and those skills? Yes, but you should understand that it's going to be different. But in regards to creation like this, I wanted to kind of showcase it for one because all of this was made based off of intuition. So I don't know what chords I played. I just kind of did everything by the piano roll, but I knew that I wanted to make something in F minor, probably like a Dorian mode or something. I'd say that's probably what the closest thing is. But if you listen to the chords and all that, some of them are wrong, and that's because there are some modality changes, and I don't know what I did. None of it was something that I would be able to label, if that makes sense. However, in terms of creating stuff, I've heard enough jazz in my lifetime, like, and I'm not talking about like Broadway jazz. I'm talking about like bebop. Like we're in the studio session and everybody is like getting in, and they're competing and all that other stuff. Whether or not I'm close is a totally different thing. Uh, but this is what came about from listening to a lot of that. And so there's kind of like this midpoint about what it is that you're going to be happy with and what it is that you're going to be satisfied with. What I can tell you is that if you are able to make a melody, that is like 90% of how this came together. So the first thing that I did was actually with this little thing, I had this melody of like a do 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 do, and what chords came out of that, I just kind of fiddled around and messed with. But what was cool about that is something that you hear in a lot of jazz tracks as an intro of like, just a cool little like rising chord progression or something, and then it gets down into the rhythm and the breakdown or whatever. But yeah, if you have a basic skill of being able to make a melody and then you're able to connect another note below it, and I'm trying to keep this as like 5-year-old as possible without talking about anything technical whatsoever, then you can harmonize, and once you have two notes that are starting to harmonize with each other, then that's how you can start to build your chords and you can start to create, new and unpredictable things about it. I wanted to talk about this because when I first started making music, I was like, oh, I want to combine, like heavy electronic music with Castlevania music and cool basses and all that other stuff. And the way that I went about it was I'd sit down and listen to these tracks and stuff and try to use my ears to like separate the notes and all that. And the thing is that your ears are extremely nuanced, the way that you hear stuff, but a lot of times they're easily lied to. And the cool thing about that, or easily fooled rather, the cool thing about that is that you can use that to your advantage whenever you're creating stuff. The bad thing about it is that if you don't have the training for it yet, it's very difficult to discern what the difference between a lot of harmonies are. But just like anything, with enough studying, if you even just study chords and like you don't take it as a means of there's this, and this, you just start with one chord and you say, that's what this sounds like. And then you change the key. That's what this sounds like. Then like maybe you can't tell what pitch it is or whatever, but you'll recognize the harmonic relationship because they are actually numeric values and ratios of pitch, which is really cool. So with that, that's pretty much how all this stuff came together. And then a lot of the like, I would say like obviously this track is super dead and super bland, but some of the rhythmic placements and all that just come from being inspired from listening to stuff like jazz. One track that comes to mind, Take Five, is a great one. And then there is an iteration on that from Free the Robots called Session 2, and that's just a really awesome song. My favorite things, the remix that Outkast did, or Andre 3000, is a really cool expression about how he plays piano and about how he phrases a lot of that stuff with these chords and with these crazy things. But the thing is that a lot of these just follow a melody. So even just this, do 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 do, and playing off of something like that, is relatively easy to do, but it sounds nicer because I've dressed it. I took a melody and I equipped it with support, I guess would be the best way to describe that. So that being said, I don't think that this is compelling or anything. This isn't realistic or whatever, but it is placement. It is something that is composed and it is something that can be improved. Or I could give this to somebody and be like, hey, how can this be played to make it more alive and have a different discussion? The thing with this, though, that I want to talk about is that this approach with making melodies and harmony and stuff is very different from somebody that has classical training or, jazz training or academic training. It's also very different than if you were to use something like scalar or a sequencer or an arpeggiator or something else of the sort. And a lot of times, one of the main reasons why is because we don't really have a lot of tools that help you change modality. But the other thing is that the way that you would write that and the way that you would get to those new modes and all that other stuff would be so strange, excuse me, that it would be difficult to pull it off. I guess. Like at some point, you're going to have some kind of human intervention in order to shape it in the way that you did. But for me personally, I think that for writing something like this, it's much easier to just do the melody and then start to try to change the modality within the piano roll. So this other example that I have is something kind of like this, where we've got harmony bloom and then we have a step sequencer with another piano. But the thing is like, I guess coming from the same mind and the same, imagination, utilizing a tool like this is going to give me completely different results. And I think that it's important to say, like, I'm trying to shoot in the gray here. I'm not trying to say, like, it's going to be one or the other, but you can use me as a use case to figure out how, or to just understand that depending on what kind of tools you use and how you approach making musicality, melody, harmony, is going to shape the outcome. Not that it matters, but it's going to shape the outcome of what you produce. For example, I made this, amalgamation of a step sequencer and made lots of changes to it, and then combined harmony bloom along with the key filter that gives me melodic content. So let's just listen to what that sounds like. So with this, we're in F Dorian, and we're playing a minor ninth and getting, different stuff kind of like this, right? Likewise, if I were to change the rate, even ever so slightly, we're going to start getting stuff like this. If I were to, I kind of like that, so I'm going to save it for like resampling purposes. But if I were to change this into something different, maybe I can change the steps or something. If I were to take the scale off, for example, something kind of like this, then this is what that sounds like. If I were to use a key filter instead of something like harmony bloom, let's say we go into F Dorian, it's very different, Everything that I just played, except for when the key filter was off, is musical and harmonious. There's harmony involved. There might be some dissonant chords in there and stuff, but and the grand scheme of thing of listening to it as a whole, it works. I think is the best way to describe that. But do you see how utilization of this kind of stuff creates this dichotomy of, same notes, same scale, same input, but the information, the data that's being plugged in has a totally different outcome. So my advice to you in regards to all this, to utilize these tools, is to, for one, try to develop an ear yourself, to be able to kind of finagle with stuff. Learning, what dictates the difference between a major and minor scale will actually do a lot for you. Like you'll feel like there's a whole new world if you know how to find that between the 12 keys in a Western scale. That being said, learning how to solo with a pentatonic scale, and very basic steps kind of like this will get you a very long way of how to manage coming up with some musical ideas of your own. But then when you have that and you start to develop that, listening to specific things and listening to the cadences of, especially with jazz, because jazz is something that is notorious for breaking a lot of rules, and that's why I love it so much. A lot of the chords that if you listen to on their own, within this little arrangement that I made, if they are pit up against a different set of the same chords, so maybe if I put this with this one in isolation, it wouldn't work. But for whatever reason, I think for the most part, the chords that are in here, there's nothing in here that jumped out to me that I was like, that's off. It was all just like roll with it. And together with the rhythm, everything kind of comes together in that sense. So this is kind of just like an awareness video, I mean, even if you were to use Scalar 2 and have it pick out chords for you and all that, it's still, you can use it as a foundation, but it still confines you into just being like, this is the chords, this is my song, and this is all I'm going to do, you know? And this is also very different than a four chord harmony or 4-part harmony, right? Where something like pop music or whatever would be just the same chords pretty much, except for maybe the bridge. Song structure composition is incredibly useful, even if you make bass music, even if you make, you know, the kind of stuff that I do, which does hardly uses any of this stuff. But I find that what's interesting is that this pulls me into a very different creative space and mindset than if I were to be making beats. I think is the best way to describe that. I have drums under here, and ironically, the drums suck because it was an afterthought about what to do with the main stuff, which is the melody and harmony. And that I will conclude the video and say that depending on what you start with, which is something I've said in another video, it's going to shape how you flesh out a song. It's going to shape like your initial starting point or your focus is what's going to dictate the kinds of tracks that you make, you know. If you start making a pop song, I mean, if you like in the midst of the process, if you really just like flip a switch or something and then you're like, I'm going to make this into a halftime track or something, like it's not that you can't do it, but a lot of times if you're giving in to the creativity and you allow yourself to kind of just finish what comes naturally, let's go with that one, and you're not like breaking out on purpose, then yeah, what you start with is generally going to kind of like dictate where the outcome is going to be in the first place, even if you have a chaotic workflow. So in any case, I just kind of wanted to share this track with you because it was kind of fun to write, and I did it in like an hour or so, and it was super fun. But I do think that this overall awareness thing will be helpful in being like, yo, do I need that chord plugin? No. Do I need that arpeggiator thing or blah, 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 whatever? No, no. It's, you need to know what you're looking for. And if you don't know what you're looking for, then don't buy anything. But knowing what you're looking for and knowing a path to evoke what it is that you're trying to express within your music should dictate how you kind of like take another step in within your journey. And I'm not saying that you should be so methodical with it, but there's a lot of things that I'm teaching now that I wish that I would have learned, you know, 10 years ago. I do wish that I would have done a little bit of jazz theory. And it's not too late. And I have, you know, something, which is better than nothing. But if I wanted to make, you know, cool and swingy beats like I am now, and I wanted to bring up some really sick chord progressions and stuff and utilize all my sound design to that, you know, it would have been a lot easier if I would have just taken a little bit of time away from making neurobasses and instead been like, you know, what is a, yeah, anyways, what is a complicated chord that I can, you know, actually play? And then there's that other aspect of being able to actually play what you make, you know, of having a guitar, having a piano, or having a real life instrument and being able to express that and then turn that into an entire musical piece. Remember, like if you're a producer, you're pretty much wearing all the hats. And it's not to say that you have to. It's not to say that you must be able to play guitar and piano and saxophone and all this other stuff and you have to be a boss at musical composition or whatever. Excuse me. But these tools will help you for sure. And they will also help you keep the production aspect of it very diverse. For me, I've got a guitar, I've got an Oxy 1 sequencer, I've got a step sequencer within Bitwig now. And I try to see the potential within all these tools. And if I get latched onto something, for better or for worse, I'll try to expose it as much as possible until I run it dry. And then I'll move on to something else until like maybe my creative juices for that tool flow back or something like that, you know? It's like if you get tired of using Serum, then you go phase plant. And then the same thing happens with you in phase plant. Maybe you go back to Serum because you have a different perspective on it or something of the sort. So anyways, I know that this was a long-winded conversation, and I hope that this idea or whatever I'm talking about is helpful to you, but I did want to show you what happens when you have this approach to this approach to this approach from the same person. So thanks everybody. Grab my sounds at alckemy.com, book a lesson with me, unless if you're wanting to learn music theory. I'm not the person for that. But in any case, much love guys. I'll see you and Happy New Year.